This is the second half of our chat with our new city council members. We are here with Brent. Brent, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here for this second half of this program. So we'll get to it right away. Tell us what life has been like post-election.
Okay.
I understand that you and your family took a trip right after your victory. Tell us where you went.
All right. And this is not to be cliche, but I had promised the kids about 2 months ago before the election was had the election night, and I said, win or lose, you guys have just hung in there great. You've been troopers, so we'll go to Disneyland if after the election. So that's where we went last week. Went down there for a few days and got a chance to do all the different rides with the kids, and it was a lot of fun to get away from I guess being in the middle of the pot, so to say.
What does your family think of you being elected city council member, and how are you going to balance the duties of the council, family, and your job at
Weaver Lumber?
Weaver Lumber?
Well, at least the good news before this campaign, I was quite busy before, and so I've learned to basically prioritize things in my life, and you definitely have to get very organized. Back to your question of, how did the family take it? I'd say all 4 of my kids really wanted to see me win, and they were very happy when I did. And my wife has just been incredible, very, very supportive, and I think she accepts that I won, and it's a new responsibility over the next 4 years, but we will find a way to prioritize and, make sure that the family doesn't suffer as a result of Dad giving back community service. But we made the decision as a family, and we thought it was important enough to run, and whether I won or lost, but that our children saw this example that it is important to give back to your community. And having grown up here and operating a small business that's been in the community for 3 generations, it was time to give back, and very grateful for the opportunity and the trust that the voters have bestowed upon me.
Okay. You got strong support in the election. You were first in the race, and by a significant margin. Do you think that says something about what the voters were thinking, and is that a mandate of sorts?
I think it was a mandate on particular issues more than potentially people running. I think we saw a few things from this election that were very telling. One was certainly the candidates that were voted in, but we also saw 2 things during the course of this campaign that I think they impressed something upon me, and that was the 2 previous town hall meetings that Chief Paletti has put on, going 2 back at Sequoia Middle School, and then more recently the Safe City project that was kind of in conjunction with one of Chief Paletti's town hall meetings. But to see at Sequoia roughly 600 to 700 people show up and hundreds turned away, and then fast forward to more recently with the Safe City project, and I think people estimated there was roughly 1,000, maybe more, that attended that meeting. I mean, that's unprecedented to get that type of interest level for people to turn out. And I think the mandate is that this community wants to see solutions on public safety.
Okay. And so, same question that I asked Kristen, but in talking to people in the community, have the issues changed, or do they remain the same as far as priorities go for the council?
Well, I think now those who are elected, we will now be seated with the newly formed council, and instead of being one voice when you're campaigning, you're speaking for yourself and on behalf of your campaign. Well, now you're one of 5 voices. I certainly believe that again, the message that was sent, probably 2 messages that I think were takeaways. One was that public safety is clearly on the minds of everyone throughout our community, and the second is the community assigns a very high value to working together. We see changes in opinions and different political currents that go through communities, and I thought it was an interesting contrast. You saw, Doug LaMalfa carried almost every precinct in our community, and then you saw Francie and Kristen we're able to defeat some typically more conservative candidates. And I would say that is potentially because of the fact that, we've gone through a very divisive last several years up on our council. And, it's not, much different than, parents who, continue to squabble and fight in front of their children. It just hurts the children, or in this case, it hurts the citizens of our community when we're spending more time just not agreeing or wanting to work together, and we're not tackling the bigger issues like public safety, economic development, how we're going to deal with this new world of, financial constraints.
So in general, the voters are tired of the fighting.
I think so.
Okay. Well, speaking of public safety, I imagine that would be one of the first things that you'd like to tackle.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you do it?
Well, believe it or not, the steps have actually kind of already started. Even though Kristen and myself have not been seated on the council, the last several weeks have had a lot of pre-orientation type meetings, where we kind of learned the inner workings of a city council meeting, and how you bring measures forward, and how you're going to basically push forward an agenda. And I think we'll see over the next few council meetings some motions brought forward that basically will be the call to action for what we saw during this campaign. I think we're going to see some steps taken very quickly.
Do you want to be more specific? I imagine that you're touching on your strategic plan that you talked about throughout the campaign.
Yeah, so will you be there tomorrow night, Jenny?
I
All
will.
right. Well, you won't have to wait too long.
Not even a little clue.
The strategic plan, you will hear some discussions tomorrow night, but I
Okay.
think it's good to wait at the right time.
Okay. Funding is a big part of whatever the solution is going to be. So I'm sure that you've thought about that as well. How would you, or would you be able to get behind a sales tax initiative?
Yeah. So, what I will say, I agree. So the first step of this overall process to basically move from where we are today in our community to where we want to be on public safety, you start with a plan. It's, I use this example several times during the course of the campaign. Being a business person, before I started a new business or I started a new department or offered a new service, we came up with a business plan. And what comes out of that business plan is, different strategies you'll use to, grow and promote that business, staffing levels, strategies, and then what the funding might be. And I've said several times, it's hard to know how much money you're going to need until you craft some type of plan. It's also like, before you go to a bank and ask for money using one of my real estate developments, you have to design the building first before you can assign a value. So once we have that plan that, I believe it needs to really be bought in, and the ownership of it needs to take place from the law enforcement community. And once that plan comes back and, the city council reviews it, then we'll start the discussion on how we fund that. And, I'll just continue to be very clear and consistent with some of my previous comments, which is no option should be taken off the table for how we will fund that plan. Again, I think it's one of the very clear messages that was sent to us as elected leaders and staffs at the city and the county. The community wants to see solutions in place. They want to see a plan. And then us as elected leaders, our most, probably the most important role and responsibility we have is for setting priority with our budget, to make sure that we spend our reserves correctly. And after we've looked at all of those things as a very last option, if we just can't find any of the funding, then we have that discussion at that time about potentially a future tax measure. But right now, because it's so preliminary, I want to keep my energy and my focus on the formation of this plan, and then we'll move, after that plan's created, then we'll move to how we fund that plan.
That may take some time. What do you do in the interim?
Well, it could take some time on the strategic plan, which is probably why it's very, very critical we begin the work immediately. I think AB 109 definitely put stress on our community in a way we hadn't experienced before. And then Proposition 47, I think we're going to see over the next several months and years how that's potentially going to negatively affect our community. We need to get this plan created immediately. And then I have heard that, it's not necessarily just from City Council where ideas and discussions can begin for how we fund some of these things. I've heard organizations like the Chamber of Commerce right now are brainstorming different ideas. Merchants Crime Watch, which I would open up to not just business owners, but anyone concerned about safety in our community. The next Merchants Crime Watch meeting is this Wednesday at 2 o'clock, I believe. And I think we should continue that conversation of potential funding. But again, my energy and my focus as a policymaker will be on the plan first.
Okay. Is it too soon to be thinking about, and I understand your role, but is it too soon to be thinking about a sales tax initiative potentially in 2015?
I certainly don't think it's too soon to be thinking about it, but I think it's too soon for me as a yet to be seated council member to be discussing it. But I would say I think everyone should be thinking about, I guess, the next part of this process. But sorry to keep coming back and telling you my position, but I'll be focusing on the formation of the strategic plan.
Is it too soon to think general tax or a public safety tax?
Well, I would certainly be willing to give my opinion of what we just went through with Measure F. I was of the opinion that although I did not support Measure F, that if there was going to be something like that brought forward, a general tax in that instance probably would have been more productive than a dedicated, only because you're looking at a 50% plus one on a general measure versus a 66% vote plus one. So, if we want to give opinions in hindsight, I'm certainly willing to do that, but we'll be somewhat cautious on how I discuss moving forward.
Okay. Liaison assignments. You said very early on in this campaign that it's important that council members pay attention to the liaison assignments that they are given. What are your interests? What liaison assignment would you be interested in?
Well, whoever ends up being the mayor on Wednesday night will have that ultimate responsibility of assigning liaison responsibilities. Like Kristen, I will be willing to give of my energy and talents at whatever liaison position I am assigned. With that said, though, I will be happy to share with you that I would definitely be hopeful that I would be considered for the police liaison position, considering where I spent my time over the past year. I really would like to continue that conversation now that I'm elected, and I think if our future mayor decides to give me that liaison responsibility, I'd be very grateful for that. Another liaison responsibility, whether I'm considered it or not, that I think would be a good fit for my kind of background as a person before I ran would be for the EDC, Economic Development Council. So again, these are just suggestions, but ultimately it'll be for the mayor to decide which liaison responsibilities she gives out, or she or he.
Okay. Since you bring up the EDC, I wanted to ask you in regards to something that you were doing during your campaign. At first, it started out with your rallies, and then it sort of shifted toward the end to meeting with companies. And so, what did you learn from those visits when you went out to visit those companies, and how do you use that information to apply it to whatever it is that you're plan to craft as an economic development for the city?
Yeah. One of the things, one of the lessons I think I've learned in business is, and I think most people do, I don't think it's unique to me, is you want to be careful not to reinvent the wheel. So if you see something that's working, you either want to figure out how you can duplicate that or potentially improve upon that. And I had been hearing over the past year and a half about these different startups that have begun to take root in our community, from N Computing, Axiom, and then some of these other startups that are located out on Airport Road in the old, I think it's the old, or not old, but the current Shara Dunlap Sawyer building in there. And as we were getting towards the end of the campaign, we had done some rallies. We obviously had a lot of outreach on social media, but I thought it would be a nice shift. And we were also we're walking a lot of neighborhoods door to door. But I thought it would be a nice shift for me to reach out to some of these smaller businesses, and had a chance to meet somebody who had it in there. And so they set up a meeting with 5 of these different startups. And it was fantastic. Got a chance to go visit with each of them. Started out by just giving them a small 5 to 10 minute spiel about why I was running for city council, and then I got a chance to listen to them. Why did they come to Reading? And in a lot of instances it was because of Simpson College or Bethel or some of these other things. But what was very interesting for me was that they all wanted to stay in Reading. So after they got here, whether it was for school or for religious, they fell in love with the community, with the outdoor recreation, with the number of days of the year that sun's out. And they just said they wanted to set roots here, and they wanted to invest in this community. So one of the things that I've talked often about is 2 things. One is we need to continue to play up our strengths in this community. Having grown up here, went away for college, worked, and then come back, one of the just huge things that attracted me back to Reading was the outdoor recreational opportunities. And I think we need to continue to play up that strength as we, whether it's from the EDC or other organizations, as we market ourselves to outside businesses. Owners want to go where they can have happy employees, and I think we can sell that story here in Reading. This is a place where your employees can recreate, they can be involved in their children's lives, from coaching youth sports. They can be mountain biking before work, after. So that's one side of the story I think we need to do a better job of selling. But then the other thing is we need to focus on those jobs that create the type of livable wages that we can support young families on. And I think that's going to be jobs in the technology market.
Have you had any recent conversations with the EDC?
Yeah, since the election, had a chance to, run into Mark Lascelles a few times out at the ribbon cutting ceremony out at the airport, and certainly haven't had any discussions about myself becoming the liaison for that. But it's definitely there's mutual interest there in that our business backgrounds and how we can potentially work together.
Okay. Does the council have a role in regards to the homeless issue, and if it does, what is its role? What direction should the council take? Yeah,
I think it's a good question. I think we do have a role. I think to the degree that the city elects 5 individuals to be a mouthpiece for them, and I think when we can try to interpret what our constituents are feeling and want for this community, if we can articulate that, I think it can help the community as it moves forward. Now, clearly there are a lot of nonprofits in this space. I think one of the lessons that I learned over the course of the campaign is not all nonprofits in this space are giving or serving this demographic in the same way. And I think I've learned from leaders within this nonprofit space that are serving the less fortunate, the transient community, the homeless, that it's important that services and product and food and clothing and those things are provided but given in a responsible way. I would add my voice to all of the other people in this community that really do truly care about those who are less fortunate. I've always said I was raised that way in my family. Had an opportunity to serve a 2-year church mission, which centered around helping those who are less fortunate. And while remembering, those important values, I still feel that way, and I will teach my kids to, want to reach out and help. But I also think we need to shine a light on some of those practices that aren't necessarily helping this community. I thought a great analogy at the Safe City Project was the story of a faith-based organization that was in their mind, serving the needy at Caldwell Park, but maybe not realizing the effect that might have had to these soccer moms and the children that were coming to the same area that were now exposed to a certain demographic And so I think these conversations need to be done in a tactful way with sensitivity. But I think because of what we're truly living with in this community right now, we have to have this conversation. Illegal camping. Do we want to continue to see the degradation of some of our beautiful, resources next to our rivers, or up some of our canyons? Can we, have outreach and push those who need help to some of those nonprofit organizations that are equipped to help? But with that said, show some tough love over here on things that just as a community, things we don't want to allow.
Are there organizations that do get it and are doing it right?
Oh, absolutely. I think I would want to focus on those who I think are doing a good job in this space. And I think Northern Valley Catholic Social Services, if any of those out there have never toured their facilities or learned more about what they're doing in our community, I'm incredibly grateful and inspired by what they are doing here. Another great example would be Living Hope Ministry, Mike Maharo and what he's doing down there. They have the food program, the Shack, where you can work and earn not only a wage but also food credits. They have a bicycle resource plan where you can learn skills working on bicycles. They also have a reclaimed wood furniture business that we've been able to kind of get in touch with him over the last year to give them some of the leftover scraps from our lumber yard that we might otherwise throw away or give away, and they can take those scraps and create furniture out of it. So I think those are two great examples of two organizations here who are operating very responsibly.
Okay. One of the points that you included in your outline this summer to improve public safety, your 11-point plan, was the introduction of the sit-light ordinance and other measures similar to that. Is that something that you're going to continue to pursue in your first year, or?
I would say I think that will probably come up as a conversation when staff is working with law enforcement of what will be included in this, kind of comprehensive public safety plan. I think that will be something that will be considered, and obviously very much like the Safe City Project, but it will be more law enforcement experts as they are looking at things from the no sit lie ordinance to how you enforce illegal camping to panhandling, code enforcement with some of our rundown motels and apartment buildings, reinvigoration of neighborhood watch programs, utilizing new technologies. So I think the no sit lie ordinance won't be unlike a lot of the other topics and strategies, but I think they need to be considered by our law enforcement community first, and then that needs to be brought to council for for our consideration.
Okay. Switching gears here, regarding this much mentioned Economic Development Administration letter, do you think the letter itself raises concerns about communications between city staff and council members? The disclosure of the letter, I mean.
Mm-hmm. I think it. I think oftentimes in organizations, not just public but also private, we have occurrences similar to this where I think it's somewhat of a we need to rededicate ourselves to the principles that govern us. And I think, while I do not think this is a smoking gun, or I also do not think this would have swayed the election as some have alleged, but I think there's also a lesson here. I think that city staff has definitely followed the letter of the law here, but I think again, as I alleged or as I commented over the weekend in your story, I said the spirit of the law maybe wasn't followed though. And I think, when you have occurrences like this, I think it's one way to react would just be to be defensive and say, well, this is how we did it, and certainly they could have asked if they wanted to know it, and that's probably the letter of the law. But I think the spirit of the law of this organization is that is probably a piece of information that should have been out there sooner for people to consider. But again, with that said, and for where we are at this point in time and tomorrow night, it's not a smoking gun. It's not going to change the outcome. There are occurrences like this not exactly like this EDA grant, but oftentimes when you buy real estate, there are different liens tied to properties, or just hurdles you have to discuss from both sides of the party. Now, Mayor Bassetti was aware of this as part of the negotiating team, and I would just say I think the rest of the council probably should have been aware of it also. But again, I'm comfortable though that this is not going to change anything.
Okay. So wrapping this up, for the first time, social media played a role, and you probably were one of those candidates who led in the way of that through Facebook, Twitter. I think you were even on Pinterest.
We were.
So can we expect that you'll be using those platforms as a way to communicate with the public?
You can. In fact, so tomorrow night will be the swearing-in city council meeting for myself and Kristen Schrader. And for all those out there, on Wednesday, we will, as a newly elected council candidate, I will then start my first communication with the public through my Facebook. And so on some of the things that are going to be discussed Tuesday evening, I'm then going to turn around on Wednesday and reach out to those who are following me on Facebook to gather feedback from my constituents and citizens to make sure that on some of these things that are going to be discussed tomorrow night, that I get the feedback that I need so I can continue to make the right decisions on behalf of the community. So the answer is yes, you will be seeing more social media, and you won't have to wait long, because on Wednesday you'll see our first outreach.
Will that be a regular for you after the council meeting, or how often do you plan to do this?
I don't know how often we'll do it, but I would say probably very, very frequently, if not every council meeting. Anytime there's going to be an issue that comes up that I think there should be some feedback from a broader spectrum of the community, I think certainly reaching out through Facebook and other online social medias will be warranted, and it's something that we embraced it during the campaign, and we will continue to embrace it after the campaign. It's a great way, just like what we're experiencing right now. There are new ways of how we communicate, and you can either embrace that, or you can sit back and watch as other people do.
Okay. Well, Brent, thank you so much for stopping by. It's been a pleasure, and I don't think I have anything else. So
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you to the Record Searchlight. This has been a great forum. Thank you.
Thank you.